Hi everyone, Niall Paterson here, host of the Sky News Daily podcast, and today we are off to Glastonbury. Well, I'm not, I'm far too old for any of that nonsense, but many of you will be, and it's at a time of change down on Worthy Farm. Beginning almost 55 years ago, there's always been a socially conscious counter-cultural quality to the festival. But year after year, the crowds and the acts got bigger and bigger. And the value of Glastonbury wasn't just measured in terms of its contribution to British culture. As such, eyebrows were raised when founder Michael Eavis recently transferred much of his financial interest in the festival to his daughter Emily. She's very much now the boss. And frankly, it's not a complete surprise. The two have been running the show together for many years. But with the festival kicking off properly, we thought we'd look back at how it all began and find out just a bit more about Emily. To that end, I sat down with Sky's entertainment editor Claire Gregory before she made her way down to Worthy Farm. Claire Gregory is Sky's arts and entertainment editor. Good to see you, Claire. Look, what is it that makes people who go to Glastonbury bang on about Glastonbury quite as much as they do?
It does inspire kind of almost like a cult-like following, doesn't it?
You said it, not me.
So it was, born out of the counterculture in the 1960s. And yeah, of course, as time's gone on, corporations have come in and things have changed a bit. But I think it does do its best to kind of continue to be ethical and environmental. And, if you go to the Stone Circle and the Healing Fields, which are kind of, world away, fields away, if you will, from kind of the main stages where all the rowdy music's going on, it is... those hippie traditions, they are still there. You can feel all of that still. And I think that's probably at the heart of what makes it quite so special.
And certainly to the family that is at the heart of it, the Eavises, it is their life, but it's not the totality of their life. How unusual is it for one family to be at the heart of something so culturally significant in the UK?
I'd say extremely unusual. It is a cultural kind of touch point. It's such a big deal for so many reasons. We often think of the music, and of course that's a big part of it, but there's every kind of performance art going on. In fact, it's actually truly... the real name of Glastonbury is Glastonbury Performing Arts Festival. It's far more than just music. And it manages to be a kind of leader in these kind of areas. And it's seen as a pinnacle of lots of artists' careers.
So we got a whole lot of other stuff, isn't it? All the theatre, the circus, the Las Vegas, and there's poetry and there's green politics and there's green debates and there's flowers. And we've got train sets, we've got ghost trains, we've got a lot,
It's not just about the musicians. There's a whole heap of creativity in all its forms generated by people like Joe Rush. He's an artist responsible for the iconic Carhenge and is one of the festival's creative directors. Joe, just how did you get first involved in Glastonbury? Did Michael have a hand in it?
I was in a squat in London and I built, this was in 1985, and I'd got a burned out bus that I'd turned into a giant skull. I put all my sculptures on them, my metal sculptures. And my intention was to drive to Stonehenge Free Festival in 1985. But what happened was that Margaret Thatcher had set up a roadblock to stop the travellers going in, to stop the peace convoy going in. And by the time we'd actually got ready to leave London in our skull bus, Middle England was in lockdown, and so we decided to go to Glastonbury, and so that was how we ended up at Glastonbury. And the first person we met, funny enough, was Michael. It was a muddy year. We towed the thing in the mud, and parked up in front of the main stage, which was probably a bit cheeky. And Michael turned up in a Land Rover, and I was such an arsey little brat at the time. I had a shouting match with him in the middle of the field. But eventually, we worked it out, and he's a very good judge of character, Michael. He's a very good judge of what's going to make that festival better.
Well, clearly, Michael Eavis knows how to put on a big old music festival. But as an individual, personality-wise, what's he like?
Yeah, he's a proper old rascal, and but he's to make that festival happen, he's had times where they've refused his license, times where other people have taken his license off him and forced him to bend over barrel to make the festival happen. He's been through so much. He's been through riots and COVID and all these other things, and he just kind of just deals with it. He deals with it, and at any point he just explodes into laughter about something. And I've never known a man who would just open his mouth and roar with laughter at any point in however tense a situation it is. And I think it's probably what's got him through.
Joe, you know I'm going to have to pick you up on the use of the word rascal. I have to hear more about that, because he just strikes me as a lovely old gentleman farmer. There's a rapscallion side to him, is there?
Well, be honest, there's a rapscallion side to any gentleman farmer. Farmers are farmers. And Mike is a farmer first and foremost, and he will tell you that himself. And I've been up there in 1987 when there was 2.5, quarter of a million people in that festival. And everything was going off, and gone to look for him and found him in the milking shed. So he's a proper farmer. But he is a bit of a rascal, but you have to be a bit of a rascal to be in the rock and roll business, don't you?
Of course
really?
you do. Of course you do.
But he's a straightforward man. He's an honest man, and he's a very kind man, and he's very supportive for people. He can see if someone's going to be good, and he picks up on it straight away. And he's practically always right. So he's got a very good intuition, which is why the festival is what it is.
Now, Joe, I'm going to be slightly cheeky here. Before the cameras were rolling and the microphones were switched on, you told me that there had been some wild nights with the Eavises down at Glastonbury. I'm not asking for lots of specific details, but just give us a flavour of how wild can be down at Worthy Farm.
Well, the thing that Michael always states as one of his favourite things was when he first put up the first fence and people pushed it down, and the thousands of people ran across the fields. And Michael, who really should have been mortified, was absolutely gleeful, to see these hordes of people just running in, fighting for freedom. And he loved it, and that's what kind of says the character of the man.
It does, though, feel that the festival is in a something of a period of transition. Michael stepping away and Emily stepping up, although of course she's been heavily involved in the running of the festival for a number of years. I mean, personality-wise, how does she compare to her father?
Well, she's got a brilliance. She's not the same as her father, but she's got a brilliance as well, and especially on environmental and social. The way that the festival is moving, the way it's become more inclusive, the way that the way we're bringing in people who wouldn't normally come to that festival. One of her really big thing I think I was most impressed with was her determination to stop the use of single-use plastic in the festival. And what had happened up to that point was everywhere after the band had played was plastic bottles being crunched by the public. The year she stopped it, and everyone said it wouldn't be possible. The fields were clean, and it completely changed. So she's got a very strong social drive as to how the festival can progress. And Michael's got this fantastic idea of what will really stand out in the festival. So they're not the same, but they're both really positive drivers to the festival.
Thanks, Joe. Back to our entertainment editor, Claire Gregory, by now champing at the bit to be heading down to Glastonbury. Claire, clearly it wasn't always as it is now. From tiny acorns, massive festivals apparently grow. So how did it all begin?
Michael and his then wife, they went to see a gig themselves. They went to see Led Zeppelin at an open-air concert in Bath, which is just kind of down the road from Somerset. And it was after that they decided to put on what was then called the Pop, Folk and Blues Festival. That was in 1970. And even that was attended by 1,500 people, which isn't bad, when you think of kind of, just hosting a kind of a party of 100 people is enough effort. So pretty impressive that's kind of, where they started. And in fact, they'd booked the Kinks. This is a band that everyone, even today, has still heard
Ray
of.
Davis.
Very
famous.
They were supposed to headline, but actually they were replaced at the last minute by a band which were then known as Tyrannosaurus Rex. Of course, we know them as T-Rex.
Mark Bolan.
And Mark Bolan took to the stage. Now, tickets then cost a massive whopping £1.
Really?
£1. And that included, this is amazing, free milk from the farm. So as part of your pound ticket price, you got you some milk from the farm, from the dairy cows. Now, I have checked, and that is equivalent to sort of nearly £20 by today's money, which is still a bargain. I mean, you can barely get a pint of milk for that, can you now?
I don't know if that's entirely true. But you look at the scale of the festival now, and you look at those inauspicious beginnings back in the early 70s. I mean, how does one go from that field to where we are now?
After that very initial event in 1970, the next year was a free festival, Glastonbury Fair, and then from that's really kind of what Glastonbury that we know kind of morphed from. And it was in the early 80s kind of. It started making profit in 1981, and that was at the point where Michael Eavis started kind of giving that profit away again to worthy causes. So, and in fact, causes that we still see kind of at Glastonbury today: Oxfam, Greenpeace, WaterAid. These are all causes that he's been supporting for many, many years. But there were ups and downs in the 70s and 80s. There were some issues with kind of council charges, with the local district council saying that they'd kind of, broken some rules. There was a big row between security and looters one year. But once it got to the 90s, it was smoother sailing. And in fact, possibly one of the trickiest parts in Glastonbury's history was, in fact, the pandemic years. And Michael Eavis actually gave an interview at the time in 2020 saying he thought they might go bankrupt if they didn't have another festival in 2021. But, Emily has talked about how good they are at evolving the festival, and that's how they made it through the pandemic. But like many, many live events, that was probably one of the most difficult phases for them.
Well, let's turn to Emily Eavis, the daughter, because back in, I think it was 1999, Michael Eavis, his wife, that he founded Glastonbury with, she very sadly passed away. And this was the point at which the transition began to start happening.
Yeah, and it sounds like it was incredibly, sort of surprisingly organic. Emily was the youngest of her siblings. And so when her mum got very poorly, her older siblings, they had kids and jobs and lives. And Emily was studying at college at the time. And so it just seemed natural that she would be the one that would go home to kind of support and help with the family. And then when her mum died, her mum had been a huge part of Glastonbury as well. And I think she's said in interviews that she and Michael at that point really threw themselves into kind of putting on the next Glastonbury in a kind of almost like a tribute. And it was from then that kind of really set the wheels in motion. And it's almost as if she sort of never went back. She's said, multiple times that it wasn't a life plan. It was never like, I'm going to take on the family business. She thought she was going to be a primary school teacher.
But at the same time, Glastonbury, if you are the daughter of Michael Eavis, I mean, it has to be a pretty big part of your life when you've got, I don't know, however many rock stars sitting round the kitchen table sharing a cup of tea with you.
I've got lots of memories of sort of like mayhem around that time of year, just from a child's perspective, like lots of like activity and people rushing around. But a specific memory was when I was 5. And I ended up playing violin on the main stage. I have no idea how it actually happened, but I used to play the violin from when I was about 3. And I think I used to sometimes go into denial of the festival, like shut myself off and just play my violin. And for some reason, I ended up like going on before the headliner on a Saturday night. And you missed it.
I didn't even watch it. Do you know what I was doing?
Sectioning a
I was talking a nutter down from a telegraph pole.
There you go.
So I missed the whole thing, unfortunately.
It's absolutely incredible. And I just think, perhaps being there and absorbing it as she grew up, even though she didn't realise it at the time, that would have been kind of preparing her to end up taking it on. And, no one knows how weird their childhood is, right? Until they're older. So I guess at the time she didn't realise how unusual it all was.
But has she then followed entirely in her father's footsteps, or has she put her own stamp on it?
No, she's definitely put her own stamp on it. I mean, she sort of was the person to book the first hip-hop headliner, Jay-Z. And I'm sure, anyone that has read a Glastonbury headline in their time will remember the sort of controversy
the
about
country
that.
Lost its mind over that. Jay-Z, a hip-hop, a rapper, headlining Glastonbury. Who'd have thunk it? But he killed it, though, didn't he?
He absolutely did. And it really did kind of start a new, I would say, it stamped this kind of new phase of Glastonbury of where to kind of move away from these maybe traditional kind of rock and alternative music roots and say, look, we are about more than just one thing. It is, as I was saying earlier, it's a kind of totally diverse lineup. And the idea that a headliner had to come with guitars and that seems quite odd now, but it was a controversial decision at the time. And she had to kind of she was proven right, I suppose, and I suppose that was maybe quite critical for her. You know, she is an advocate for female equality, and in 2023, post-pandemic, Glastonbury came under fire for its all-male lineup. You had Guns N' Roses and Elton John and Arctic Monkeys. And she was in a bit of a bind anyway because of the way the pandemic had come and things had moved around. Artists were no longer available. I think, you know, there probably were, it was probably a more limited kind of a range of options that she had than usual. But she did at the time speak publicly and said, look, it's the music industry, it's the pipeline. I can only put on headliners that are available. And if people aren't, you know, if there aren't enough women to put on, then I can't do it. And then, of course, last year there were the 2 female headliners with Dua Lipa and SZA. So in that sense, she is also making her mark. It kind of, you know, it is advocating for things. And then the other big thing is the environmental stuff. In 2019, it was her that was behind the decision to kind of ban all the single-use plastic bottles and, you know, cut that waste and, you know, support the environment in that way.
But brass tacks here, Claire, it's not the same, is it? It's not what it once was. It is too commercial these days. I speak not on my own behalf, but on behalf of the many people listening to this podcast that aren't quite as Glasto-daft as you.
Well, I think it has changed. Of course it has over the years. I mean, the reality is now it's £378.50 for your ticket.
God.
And you don't even get free milk with that. You know, it's 200,000 people. And yeah, so just with that ticket price alone, of course, you know, you do the maths. A lot of families are struggling. That's, you know, a huge amount of money for a pair of people to go, and that's just your entry. You know, after that, you've got to be able to buy food, drink, everything else.
And plenty of people pitch up how many days before the festival even starts, so they can get somewhere to sleep,
so that you can sleep somewhere half decent. And that doesn't feel like those kind of stone circle kind of hippie routes of where it started. So it
sandals and wet wipes. Yeah, not quite the same, is it?
Exactly that. So yeah, of course it's changed. Of course it has, but it has to evolve if it wants to keep selling out.
But none of which is to say that, you know, Emily Eavis doesn't have challenges ahead.
No, of course. The festival, all festivals are beset by kind of issues, things like rising costs. You know, you're competing for the best artists. You've got to watch out with all those conditions of licence put on you from local councils and things like that. I mean, operational costs are up, staffing costs, everything. It is hard. But then you look at Glastonbury, I just checked, it sold out in 35 minutes last year. And you think, well, they're doing something right that other festivals aren't.
Thanks, Claire. And you can keep up with all the events at Worthy Farm. Just head to the website, skynews.com. And if you're off to the festival, do make sure to drink plenty of water and don't forget your wet wipes. The Daily is back on Monday. I hope you have a cracking weekend. Thanks for watching the video. If you want to see more from the Sky News Daily podcast, just click over here. And if you'd like to see more videos from Sky News, why don't you click on this side?